Maya wiped the grease off her hands with a rag that had seen better days. The morning sun was climbing higher, warming the cracked pavement outside her garage. It was a small shop, nothing fancy, just two service bays, a faded sign that read Maya's Auto Repair, and a loyal but modest set of customers who came by when their cars needed care. For Maya, this place was more than just a garage. It was her dream, her pride, and her fight to stand tall in a world that didn't always make it easy for young women like her. She had grown up watching her father work on engines. He was a mechanic too, and even though money had been tight when she was a child, she always remembered how he would hum quietly while fixing cars, as if every loose bolt or squeaky brake was just another puzzle to be solved. When her father passed away, Maya promised herself she would keep his passion alive. That's why she opened her own garage, even though many people had told her it would be too hard, that customers might not take her seriously, that she should look for something safer. But Maya wasn't the kind to give up. That morning, as she organized her tools, she heard the sound of an old truck struggling down the road. The engine coughed and sputtered, groaning louder with every turn of the wheels. Maya looked up and saw the truck slow to a crawl until it stopped completely just a few yards from her shop. The driver's door opened, and an elderly man stepped out, leaning slightly on his cane. He looked tired, his shoulders a little bent, but there was something proud about the way he carried himself. His truck was old, paint faded, and the hood still smoking faintly. Maya walked over and offered a smile. "Need a hand?" she asked. The man gave a polite nod. "Seems like she finally gave up on me," he said, patting the hood of his truck gently, as though it were an old friend. Maya motioned him toward the garage. "Let's push her in. I'll take a look." She waved for one of her neighbors, who had been sweeping outside his store, to give her a hand. Together, they rolled the truck into the bay. The old man lowered himself into one of the worn chairs by the wall, watching as Maya popped the hood. "Been running this truck since, must be close to 30 years now," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of age. Maya glanced at him with curiosity. "That's a long time. Must mean it's got a lot of memories." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah. Been with me through plenty. Moved my family across states, carried supplies when times were hard, even hauled me home from the base after long days. She's been loyal." There was a pause in his voice when he said the word base, and Maya caught it. She looked at his jacket, old and faded but neat, with a patch on the sleeve that told her what she already suspected: he was a veteran. She smiled warmly. "Well, let's see what we can do for her." Maya bent over the engine, checking the belts, the plugs, and the oil. The truck was in rough shape, but she knew she could get it running again. Still, the repairs wouldn't be small. She looked back at the man, who sat with his hands resting on his cane, his eyes watching her every move. "Sir, it's going to need a good amount of work," Maya said gently. "It's not just a quick fix." The man sighed, his shoulders slumping just slightly. "Figures. I been putting it off, hoping she'd last a little longer. Truth is, I don't have the money for a big repair right now." Maya's heart softened. She thought of her own struggles, how hard it was to keep the lights on in her shop, how the bills piled up at the end of every month. Yet, looking at the man before her, she couldn't bring herself to say no. He reminded her of her father in some ways, strong and quiet, carrying years of sacrifice in his eyes. She set her wrench down and straightened up. "Don't worry about the cost. I'll fix it." The old man looked at her in surprise. No, I couldn't let you do that. You've got a business to run. I know what repairs cost." Maya shook her head firmly but kindly. "You've already paid more than enough for this country. The least I can do is make sure your truck runs." For a long moment, the man just stared at her, his eyes misty with gratitude he didn't quite know how to express. Finally, he nodded. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Maya replied, picking her tools back up. Just sit back and let me do what I do best. As she worked, Maya lost herself in the rhythm of tightening bolts, replacing wires, and adjusting parts. She could feel the veteran's eyes on her, but it didn't make her nervous. If anything, it gave her more determination. She wanted to give him back not just a working truck, but a little bit of hope, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Every now and then, she caught him smiling softly, as if he was watching something far bigger than a repair, maybe watching the spirit of a young woman who still believed in doing the right thing. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the garage with a golden glow. Maya wiped her forehead, leaving a streak of grease across her skin, but she didn't care. She turned the key, and the engine roared back to life, smoother than it had in years. The old man's face lit up with joy. He stood slowly, gripping his cane, and walked over to the truck as if he were approaching an old friend who had just returned. He ran his hand along the side of the hood, eyes shining. It's like new," he whispered. Then he turned to Maya. "You have no idea what this means to me." Maya smiled, tired but content. "I think I do." He reached into his pocket, fumbling for his wallet, but Maya raised a hand quickly. "No charge." "I mean it." His hand froze, and then he slowly put the wallet back. Instead, he straightened as much as his old back would allow and raised his hand to his forehead in a solemn salute. The gesture was so full of respect and gratitude that Maya felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, miss," he said softly. "From the bottom of my heart." Maya returned his smile, her own eyes glistening. "Take care of yourself, and take care of her," she said, nodding toward the truck. The man climbed in, started the engine, and drove off down the road, the sound of the truck smoother and stronger than it had been in a long time. Maya stood by the garage door, watching until the truck disappeared around the corner. She turned back to her tools and the quiet shop, feeling both exhausted and strangely uplifted. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether more customers would come, or if the bills would keep pressing down on her. But for that moment, she felt at peace. What she didn't know was that this small act of kindness was only the beginning of something far greater. In a few days, the past would circle back in a way she could never have imagined, with a letter that would change her life. The morning after Maya had fixed the old veteran's truck, the garage felt a little brighter, though she couldn't say why. Maybe it was the satisfaction of seeing the man's face light up as his truck came back to life, or maybe it was the way he had saluted her before leaving. That image had stayed with her through the night. She didn't often meet people who carried such quiet dignity. Maya went about her usual routine, sweeping the garage floor, organizing the shelves, and preparing for whatever cars might roll in that day. Business had been slow for weeks, and she worried about how she would cover rent and utilities, but she tried to push those thoughts away. She had always believed that good things came back to those who put good into the world. By late morning, she was working on a customer's sedan when she heard a familiar sound outside, the gentle rattle of that old truck's engine. She straightened, wiping her hands on her rag, and sure enough, the veteran had returned. His truck pulled into the lot smoothly, and this time, there was no smoke, no coughing sound from the engine. It purred like it was grateful to be alive again. The man stepped out slowly, leaning on his cane. He had a faint smile on his face as he looked at Maya. "Runs like a dream," he said, his voice warm. Maya chuckled. "She's got a lot of life left in her, trust me." He nodded, then reached into his truck's passenger seat and pulled out a small paper bag. "I know you didn't want money, but I couldn't just come back empty-handed. So I brought you something." Maya raised her eyebrows. "What is it?" He handed her the bag, and inside was a neatly wrapped sandwich and a bottle of iced tea. "Made it myself this morning," he said. "Figured you could use a good lunch." Mechanics burn a lot of energy. Maya laughed softly, touched by the gesture. You didn't have to do that, but thank you. This means a lot. She set the bag on her workbench and looked at him curiously. By the way, you never told me your name. The old man smiled. Harris. Daniel Harris. Most people just call me Dan. Maya, she replied, extending her hand. But you already know that from the sign out front. He shook her hand firmly, though his grip was weaker than it must have once been. Still, there was strength behind it, the kind that came from years of hard work and sacrifice. They stood there for a moment, two people from very different generations, connected by nothing more than an old truck and a moment of kindness. Then Mr. Harris nodded toward the sandwich bag. Don't let it get cold, he said with a grin, and climbed back into his truck. Maya watched him drive away, her chest warming with something she couldn't quite put into words. She returned to her work, but the day felt lighter, her steps a little quicker, her smile a little wider. That evening, after closing up, she sat at her small desk in the corner of the garage. She pulled out a notebook where she often wrote down her thoughts. Her father had taught her that writing was a good way to keep the heart steady. She scribbled down what had happened that day, about Mr. Harris, about the sandwich, and about how sometimes the simplest gestures could mean so much. The days that followed blended into routine. Customers came in for oil changes, brake replacements, and the usual fixes. Maya kept busy, though business was still lean. Yet, no matter how tired she was, she often thought of the veteran and his kind smile. One afternoon, as she was locking up, she noticed an envelope stuck in the small slot of her garage door. It had her name written neatly on the front, the letters pressed carefully as though someone had taken their time. She picked it up, curious, but for some reason, she didn't open it right away. Instead, she slid it into her bag and carried it home, telling herself she would read it later when she had time to sit quietly. But even before opening it, Maya had a feeling it was from Mr. Harris. That night, she sat at her tiny kitchen table with a cup of tea. The garage's bills were spread across the surface, reminding her of the weight on her shoulders. She sighed, pushing them aside, and reached for the envelope. She tore it open gently, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The handwriting was neat, a little shaky, but strong enough to be read easily. Dear Maya, it began. I wanted to take a moment to thank you again for what you did for me. You didn't just fix my truck. You reminded me that kindness still lives in this world. People like you make all the difference. I've lived a long life, and I've seen the best and the worst of people. What you showed me that day was the best. Please know that I will not forget it. With gratitude, Daniel Harris. Maya read the words twice, then a third time. Her eyes stung with tears she hadn't expected. She folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the envelope as if it were something precious. For her, it was. Over the next few days, Maya kept the letter with her, tucked safely in her desk at the garage. Whenever the shop was quiet or the worry of bills threatened to overwhelm her, she would take it out and read it again. Somehow, it gave her strength. One late afternoon, a man walked into the shop asking if she was Maya. When she nodded, he introduced himself as a member of a local veterans group. Mr. Harris told us about you, he explained. Said you treated him with respect and fixed his truck when he needed it most. We wanted to come by and thank you in person. Maya was surprised, even a little embarrassed by the attention, but the man's words made her proud too. They talked for a while, and he promised to spread the word among other veterans who might need reliable help with their vehicles. After he left, Maya sat alone in the garage, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows across the floor. She thought about how a single act of kindness, one decision not to charge an old man for his repairs, was now rippling outward in ways she never could have imagined. She didn't know yet just how far those ripples would reach, or how much her life would change because of them. But she felt it, deep in her heart, that something bigger was on its way. For now, though, she was simply grateful. Grateful for the old truck that broke down outside her shop. Grateful for the man who reminded her that doing the right thing always mattered. And grateful for the letter that had found its way into her hands, carrying with it a message she would treasure forever. Days turned into weeks, and life at Maya's garage settled back into its usual rhythm. She spent her mornings opening the big rolling doors, letting in the sunlight, and waiting for customers to come by with cars that needed her touch. Some days were busier than others, but most days felt slow. The bills on her desk didn't stop piling up, and sometimes she wondered how much longer she could keep the garage running. But whenever doubt started to creep in, she would reach for that letter from Mr. Harris. She kept it carefully folded in a drawer beside her tools. On quiet afternoons, she would pull it out, read his words again, and remind herself that what she did mattered. It wasn't always about money. Sometimes it was about people, about the way one small act could mean so much to someone else. Maya's friends often told her she was too soft-hearted. "You can't run a business by giving away free work," one of them had warned. Another had teased, "Kindness doesn't pay the electric bill, Maya." She laughed it off, but deep inside, she sometimes worried they were right. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to regret helping Mr. Harris. The look in his eyes when he had saluted her that moment was worth more than any dollar amount. One Friday afternoon, the garage was quiet except for the sound of a small radio playing in the corner. Maya leaned over the hood of a car, tightening a belt, when the door creaked open. She looked up to see a middle-aged woman step inside, smiling warmly. "Are you Maya?" the woman asked. "Yes," Maya replied, wiping her hands on her rag. The woman introduced herself as Claire. "Mr. Harris told me about you. He said you're the one who fixed his old truck without charging him a penny." Maya blushed a little. "I just did what I could. He needed help." Claire nodded. "He speaks very highly of you. He told us his family, his friends, that you reminded him there's still goodness in this world. I wanted to meet you myself. And I've got a car that could use some of that kindness." She laughed lightly, and Maya found herself smiling. They talked for a while, and Claire scheduled her car for service. It wasn't a big job, but it was honest work, and Maya was grateful. The next week, another man came by, this one wearing a veteran's cap. Then another family. Slowly, word began to spread. More and more people started showing up at Maya's garage, all somehow connected to Mr. Harris. They came because they trusted her, not just for her skill but because of the heart behind it. Still, Maya's own struggles didn't disappear overnight. Some nights she sat at her kitchen table, staring at bills that outnumbered her receipts. She would rest her head in her hands and whisper to herself, "It'll work out. It has to." She thought of her father during those moments, how he used to say, "Fixing engines is easy. Fixing life, that's the hard part." One rainy evening, Maya stayed late at the garage to finish a repair. As the rain tapped against the roof, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The garage smelled faintly of oil and wet pavement. She thought about closing early the next day to give herself a break, maybe go sit by the park to clear her mind. Just then, she heard the sound of a familiar engine pulling up. The rumble was softer now, smoother, but she recognized it instantly. It was Mr. Harris's truck. She wiped her hands and stepped to the door as he parked and climbed out slowly with his cane. "Maya," he greeted warmly, his smile cutting through the rainy gloom. "Mr. Harris," she said with equal warmth. "What brings you out in this weather?" He chuckled softly. "Old habits. Never could stand staying cooped up in the house all day." Then he grew a little more serious. "But truth be told, I wanted to check on you. I heard from a few folks you've been working late nights." Maya tilted her head. "Who's been telling on me?" Let's just say people notice when someone puts their whole heart into what they do, he replied with a knowing smile. She shook her head lightly but felt touched. I'm fine. Just trying to keep things going. He leaned against his truck, his eyes studying her with the kind of care that reminded her of her grandfather. I know it's not easy, running a shop like this. But don't you doubt for a second that what you did for me mattered. You didn't just fix a truck, you lifted a spirit that had been tired for a long time. That's no small thing. His words wrapped around her like a blanket, warming her against the chill of the rain. She nodded, unable to find the right words. Anyway, he said, patting the side of his truck, she's still running like a champ thanks to you. Every time I turn the key, I think of that day. And I think of you. Maya smiled. Glad she's treating you well. They talked a little longer before he climbed back into his truck. Before leaving, he added, you never know how far a little kindness can travel. Trust me on that. Then he drove off into the rain, leaving Maya standing there with her heart heavier and lighter all at once. That night, Maya lay in bed thinking about his words. You never know how far a little kindness can travel. She repeated them quietly to herself until she drifted off to sleep. In the days that followed, she noticed subtle changes. A local bakery dropped off a box of pastries one morning as a thank you. A customer left a note with her payment, saying, "Thank you for being someone we can trust." And slowly, her appointment book started filling with names she didn't recognize. People she had never met were now choosing her garage. It wasn't a flood of success, not yet, but it was something. Something real. Something hopeful. But even with these small blessings, Maya still faced moments of doubt. One evening she sat in the garage after closing, the letter from Mr. Harris in her hands again. She read it slowly, tracing each word with her eyes, and felt her chest swell with quiet determination. She whispered to herself, if I can change one life, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I need to keep going. She didn't know yet that her story was far from over. She didn't know that the ripples of her kindness were already moving further than she could imagine. But deep down, she sensed that something bigger was on the horizon, waiting for the right moment to arrive at her door. For now, she closed the garage, locked up for the night, and stepped into the cool evening air. The city was quiet, the street lights glowing faintly. Maya walked home slowly, her mind replaying the faces of the people she had met recently, her heart carrying both the weight of her struggles and the light of her hopes. What she didn't realize was that soon, another letter was on its way. And that letter would change everything once again. It was a quiet Monday morning at the garage when Maya noticed an envelope slipped under the door. At first, she thought it might be another bill. Her heart sank a little as she bent down to pick it up, but when she turned it over, she saw her name written in neat handwriting across the front. There was no company logo, no return address, just simple black ink that seemed careful and thoughtful. She set it on her desk, planning to open it after finishing her work. A customer had dropped off a car for an oil change, and Maya always believed in finishing what she started before taking breaks. But the letter kept pulling at her attention. Every time she passed by her desk, her eyes drifted to it, curiosity gnawing at her. Finally, after the car was finished and she had washed her hands, she sat down, took a deep breath, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly, and as her eyes scanned the words, her breath caught. "Dear Maya," it began. "This is Daniel Harris. I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to write to you again because what you did for me that day continues to stay with me. I told my friends, my family, and even the veterans group I meet with every month about you. They were moved by your kindness, and many of them said the world needs more people like you. I thought you should know how much your action has spread." Maya paused, her heart swelling as she read. She pictured Mr. Harris sitting at his table, carefully writing each word, his old hand steadying the pen. She continued reading. In addition to this note, I wanted to share something with you. Enclosed is a recommendation letter I have written on your behalf to the Veterans Association. They often look for honest, skilled mechanics to work with their members, and I told them you are someone they can trust. I hope this brings you more business, but more importantly, I hope it brings you the recognition you deserve. Maya blinked, her eyes misty. She looked back into the envelope and found a second folded page. It was indeed a formal letter, praising her skill, honesty, and compassion. It was written with such warmth and detail that she felt almost overwhelmed. She leaned back in her chair, holding both letters close to her chest. For a moment, she sat in silence, the sounds of the garage around her fading away. It wasn't just about the business. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, and knowing that what she had done had truly mattered. Later that day, she taped the first letter to the inside of her desk drawer where she could read it any time she needed encouragement. The second letter she placed carefully in a folder, planning to call the Veterans Association when she had the chance. That evening, when she told her friend Lila about it over the phone, Lila gasped. Maya, do you realize what this means? This could open doors for you. Word of mouth is powerful, and if the Veterans Group trusts you, you'll have more customers than you can imagine. Maya smiled softly. I don't care so much about more customers. I just care that people know I'm here for them, that they can rely on me. Still, deep down, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new. The next few days seemed to prove that true. A man came in with a flat tire and said, Mr. Harris told me you're the best. Another customer, a woman with 2 young children, mentioned, we heard from the Veterans Group that you're honest and fair. That's hard to find these days. Each new face reminded Maya of the ripple effect of her decision to help one man without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, while Maya was changing brake pads on a car, a small group of veterans stopped by the garage. They introduced themselves, thanked her personally for helping Mr. Harris, and even offered to spread the word further. Maya felt shy with all the attention, but also grateful. She had never sought recognition, yet here it was finding her anyway. That night, as she closed up shop, she stood outside the garage and looked at the sign that read Maya's Auto Repair. The sign was faded, the paint chipped, but it still stood tall. She thought about her father and how proud he would be to see her carrying on his love for fixing cars. She thought about Mr. Harris and his kind smile. And she thought about the letters, one tucked safely in her drawer, the other promising opportunities she hadn't even dreamed of. As the weeks passed, more letters came. Some were thank you notes from customers. Some were referrals from veterans who had heard about her. Each one was a reminder that kindness had a way of circling back, often when you least expected it. But the letter from Mr. Harris remained the most special. Maya often read it when she felt tired or uncertain. His words gave her courage, reminding her that even in her struggles, she was making a difference. One rainy afternoon, when the garage was quiet, Maya sat at her desk and began writing back to him. She wasn't used to writing letters, but she wanted him to know how much his words meant to her. She wrote simply, from the heart, thanking him not just for the recommendation but for reminding her why she had chosen this path in the first place. When she sealed the envelope and placed it in the outgoing mail, she felt lighter. It wasn't about what the future held or how many customers she would gain. It was about connection, about the way 2 people from different worlds could meet by chance and end up changing each other's lives. The next morning, she opened the garage to find a line of 3 cars waiting outside. It wasn't much compared to big auto shops, but for Maya, it felt like a small miracle. As she greeted each driver, she noticed something in their eyes: trust. They weren't just there for repairs. They were there because they believed in her. And all of it, she knew, had started with one decision. One old truck. One act of kindness. and one letter that carried gratitude across the days, reminding her that the smallest choices often became the biggest turning points. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she no longer worried the way she used to. She had faith now, faith that as long as she kept doing her work with honesty and heart, life would find a way to reward her. As the sun set that evening, Maya leaned against the doorway of her garage, listening to the hum of the city around her. The envelope sat in her desk drawer inside, but its words lived in her heart. She smiled quietly, knowing her journey was still unfolding. Something bigger was still on its way, though she couldn't see it yet. For now, she let herself feel proud. Proud of her shop. Proud of her choices. Proud of the way one simple act had changed not just her path, but the lives of so many around her. The weeks that followed brought new faces, new stories, and new reasons for Maya to keep believing in the path she had chosen. Her garage, once so quiet that she sometimes doubted it would last another month, now buzzed with activity. The sound of engines being tuned, tires being checked, and tools clinking against metal filled the space almost every day. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was steady enough to make her feel hopeful again. Each customer seemed to bring something more than just a broken car. They brought kindness, gratitude, and trust. Some arrived because of the letter Mr. Harris had written to the Veterans Association. Others came because they had heard about the young mechanic who fixed a veteran's truck for free. Word had traveled further than Maya ever expected, and with each new visitor, her heart grew lighter. One chilly morning, just as autumn leaves began to scatter across the pavement outside her garage, Maya noticed another envelope in her mailbox. This one was different. It was larger, thicker, and stamped with an official seal. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a formal letter from the Veterans Association. "Dear Miss Maya," it read. "We are pleased to inform you that, based on the recommendation of Mr. Daniel Harris and the accounts of several veterans in our community, your garage has been approved as an official partner for our association. We believe your skill, integrity, and compassion make you an invaluable ally to our members. We look forward to working with you." Maya read the letter twice, her heart pounding with excitement. She had never expected anything like this. Not only would this partnership bring more customers, but it also meant her work would touch the lives of people who had given so much for their country. It was more than business, it was a calling. Later that day, when she shared the news with Lila over the phone, her friend nearly squealed. "Maya, do you understand what this means? You're going to have a full shop, maybe even more than you can handle." Maya laughed softly. "It feels unreal. I just wanted to help someone. I never thought it would lead to this." But even with the excitement, she felt a quiet humility. She remembered the beginning, her garage standing half empty, her doubts heavy on her shoulders, and then the day an old truck rolled to a stop right outside her door. That moment had changed everything. The very next week, veterans began arriving steadily. Some needed simple tune UPS, others needed more complex repairs. Many stayed to talk, sharing their stories over cups of coffee Maya kept ready in the waiting area. The garage became more than a place for cars, it became a small gathering place, a safe corner of the world where stories and laughter were exchanged as freely as services. Mr. Harris visited often. Sometimes he came with his truck, just to have it checked, though Maya suspected he also came simply to sit and chat. He would tell her stories about his younger days, about the people he had served with, and about the lessons life had taught him. She always listened with respect, grateful for his presence. One afternoon, after finishing a repair, Mr. Harris sat across from Maya in the little office corner. He leaned forward and said, "Do you see now? Do you see what one act of kindness can do?" Maya smiled, her eyes soft. "I do. And I'll never forget it." He chuckled. "Neither will I." Business continued to grow, and with it, Maya's confidence. She was able to pay off some of her overdue bills, fix up parts of the garage that had been falling apart, and even invest in better tools. The faded sign out front was repainted by a group of veterans who showed up one weekend, brushes in hand, insisting it was their way of thanking her. When Maya saw the fresh bold letters Maya's Auto Repair gleaming in the sunlight, she felt tears prick her eyes. But the greatest change wasn't in the money or the tools. It was in the way people looked at her now. They no longer saw just a young girl trying to make it in a tough business. They saw someone they could trust, someone who valued honesty over profit, someone who cared. That respect meant more to Maya than anything else. Months later, on a calm winter evening, Maya closed the garage early. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun dipped behind the horizon. She sat on the steps outside, sipping a warm drink, reflecting on how far she had come. Her thoughts drifted back to the very first day she met Mr. Harris, to the image of his worn truck rolling to a stop, to the moment she decided to fix it without asking for payment. She smiled at the memory, realizing how that one choice had shaped everything that followed. As if on cue, a familiar rumble echoed down the street. She looked up and saw the old truck approaching, headlights glowing in the twilight. Mr. Harris pulled into the lot, parked, and climbed out slowly with his cane. "Evening, Maya," he greeted warmly. "Evening, Mr. Harris," she replied, her smile wide. "Truck still running smooth?" "Like the day you fixed it," he said proudly. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "One last letter, if you'll allow me." Maya accepted it with curiosity, unfolding the page carefully. It was a simple note, written in his familiar handwriting. "Dear Maya, I want you to know that what you gave me was more than a repair. You gave me dignity when I felt small, hope when I felt forgotten, and faith in people again. Watching your garage grow, seeing the lives you touch, it fills me with joy. If my old truck had to break down anywhere, I'm grateful it broke down right outside your door. With gratitude always, Daniel Harris." Maya's throat tightened as she finished reading. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." He smiled, his own eyes misty. "No, Maya. Thank you." They stood there in the fading light, two lives woven together by chance, yet bound by something much greater: kindness, respect, and the simple truth that one act of compassion could change the course of many lives. From that day forward, Maya never doubted again. Whenever she faced challenges, she remembered the letters, the people who came to her, and the way her heart had guided her to do the right thing. Her garage was no longer just a place for fixing cars. It was a place where hope was restored, one repair at a time. And all of it had begun with a broken-down truck, a weary veteran, and a young woman who chose kindness over profit.